Well, welcome back to the Better Men, Better Ball Player podcast. I'm your host, Trey Cobb. I want to thank you for joining us here on the 48th episode of our podcast. Cannot be done without you guys, that's for sure. So I want to, again, thank you very much for turning in, especially those big thank you to who are returning to us. And if you continue sharing this podcast, it's continued growing. Get to talk to a great coach today, Coach Matt Lisle. And we will continue putting on great coaches like Coach Lisle. But man, for those people who don't know Coach Lisle, really popular coach, most followed coach on social media, I would say. Close to 1 million followers on all his social media platforms. Again, check him out at Coach Lisle, Lisle, creator of the Hitting Vault. Please make sure you follow that. Check that out, thehittingvault.com, CoachLisle.com, recruitinginsider.com. You can check out all of these platforms that Coach Lisle is on. And just what's so interesting about Coach Lisle is how much experience he's had. And he's experienced all levels of baseball, from high school, NAIA, to Major League Baseball. And then on top of it, that too, he's experienced softball. He went to the softball side and has done that. And now even through the Hitting Vault and through his different clients from baseball and softball. And he's really helped. And if you really look at the last 10 years, how the softball swing has changed, I really think Coach Lisle, we talk about this a little bit in the show, is we talk about how he's kind of a big influence on that, a big part of that, as a guy, scout in Major League Baseball, hitting coaches in Major League Baseball, in college, and then goes to softball and basically says it's nothing really different, and so now we see it's changed a little bit. So just a very unique experience. Coach Lisle is a great ambassador of the game. You can also check him out. Also, he's the author of Dear Coach, the #1 coaching industry book on Amazon bestsellers. And, man, we just get into just lessons he's learned through the experience. We get into how he's using technology. We get into how he's working individually with all his hitters, how he's always tried to do that. And really how he really starts with the mind, and how he really starts to make sure that guys are mentally, what's going on in their head, as well as what they're thinking, and then getting into the physical side of things. And we talk about the technology. We talk about even what his bunting philosophy is, and how they do that. And really, then we get into some individualizing, which we've heard a lot from a lot of great coaches. So again, another great coach talking about if everyone's doing the same thing in practice all the time, we're not doing it right. So he talked about individualizing his hitters, having individual hitting plans, but then also within a team setting, and how we're able to do that. So very, very valuable stuff. It is very fast-paced. We both talk pretty fast, and we just went from one thing to the other. And, man, it was a lot of fun. And I just cannot thank him enough for the great valuable information, giving me some time, carving out some time in his night away from his family, to just give us this great information. So, again, Coach Lisle, I can't thank you enough. Please check him out at thehittingvault.com, at Coach Lisle on all social media platforms. Very valuable stuff and things that you can definitely apply to your game and to your coaching repertoire. So let's get this thing started. And let me introduce to you Coach Matt Lisle.
I think for me, I've been very fortunate to coach at every level, from T-ball all the way up, and it just gives you, some unique experiences in regards to all different ages and levels and abilities and stuff like that. And thanks to that, I've just seen a lot of stuff in my 21 years of coaching that you get to really see, all these different things. So for me, it's really about just learning how to, help hitters and athletes at all those different levels, and everybody's wired differently. And so, some people, this morning I had a couple college softball players texting me about swings. I had a D1 head college football coach texting me about his daughter's swing and stuff. So, you're just trying to find the best way to help people. And it's just, everybody's different. And it's just part of the fun of coaching.
Mm-hmm. I would just, and I would have to say, when I started really following you and getting into it, and I know you made the switch to softball, I think now you're starting to see the softball swing kind of changed. Is that something that when you went in there, was that something that you were interested in about, like how the softball swing was different and why was it different?
Yeah, I kind of I definitely, I'll tell you what, in 2012 was the first time I really ever watched fast pitch college softball. And I watched it and I was fascinated by it. I was like, wow, this is a fun sport. But I didn't know a whole lot about a lot of the nuances and ins and outs of it. And so I started studying the swing. And my first year coaching softball was at the University of Oregon. And I just kind of quickly realized, at least in my own philosophy, that the swing was exactly the same, and that I wasn't going to change or do anything differently. And in my, now almost 9 years in college softball and in baseball together, they are the exact same swing. There's some very minor nuances, but for the most part, they're exactly the same in the way I approach it. And I think that's one of the things that has held softball back a little bit, is the argument over, the baseball swing. And I think that's kind of hurt softball a little bit. That conversation has kind of slowed down the progress of it. But for the most part, I would say that most people now agree with it. And I think probably 10 years ago it was much differently, but nowadays you won't see a lot of high-level softball hitting coaches say that they're different swings or that there's very much different about it.
Yeah, and like I said, I think you got to be one of the guys that have really helped change that from the start. Because like when you first made the move, it was such big news when you did make the move, and then I'm sure now you're starting to see just softball swings. Just they're very different.
Yeah, it's been fun to see. What I remember about softball as a kid was that it was pitching dominated, and games went 15 innings, and it was 1-0. And if you look at the history of a lot of softball at different times, it was a lot like that. And now, nowadays, you got double-digit scores all the time in softball, even in the World Series. I think pitchers still dominate the sport, but offense has really skyrocketed in the last 5 to 10 years, because I think there's been a shift in teaching a better swing, teaching better offense, and it's been fun to see the progression of it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that helped you better on the baseball side from your softball experience?
I think the biggest thing is that, again, just like learning different personalities and how people accept feedback. For me, having a career in baseball and going into softball, softball players generally like their feedback a little softer than some of the male people that I've coached in my day. So I had to learn that the hard way with some athletes. And then by learning that, I also learned that my the male coach athletes that I coached also responded better to softer feedback. And, so I think kind of hand in hand, I learned both sides, just how to deal with hitters better, how to help them better. And so if eating softball, working with softball athletes has taught me, and vice versa, is again, like how different people are and how to find out, but what's the best way they accept feedback and the best way to coach them.
I love all that, man. How they to find out the best they take feedback.
Absolutely.
Love that. So that's not necessarily because typically you hear people talk about how they learn, it's really just how you take feedback. So really you're talking about like the communication and the communication part of it.
Yeah, I just think that everybody, I think a lot of hitters or athletes, especially at the higher levels, they'll tell you, they'll say they can take feedback or they can take critical feedback, and they want it to, very clear and, just give me the truth. And it's easy to say that, but a lot of athletes don't want their feedback delivered that way. They want it a little bit softer than that. So there are different people who actually do like tough feedback, and they respond to it well. And there's other people that you gotta come in a little softer landing. So learning how each hitter accepts feedback, and by asking them how they receive that feedback, you can create this accountability. So, if you say, "Hey, Trey," I say, "Trey, how do you like your feedback?" You say, "Oh, give it to me straight. I don't want any sugarcoat." And then I say, "Hey, Trey, you need to work on X, Y, or Z." And then you get defensive and fight back, or don't like that delivery. I can come back to you and say, "Hey, Trey, you told me you wanted it straight. You wanted it. You didn't want me to sugarcoat it." And what I'm getting from you is that you wanted it sugarcoated. So, it helps with some accountability, and it helps with some communication when an athlete tells you this is how they want something. And then when you give it to them that way, if they don't receive it well, you can have that next conversation of, "Oh, hey, maybe you don't like it. Maybe you don't want it straight," or vice versa. So I just think it's helpful to ask and learn how players receive feedback, how they like to work, how they like to communicate. Same thing goes with text or FaceTime or anything else for that matter. There's some athletes who do a better job communicating via text message for whatever reason. It's just that's welcome to 2021.
Yeah.
But you got to find the way to connect with your hitters, and you got to find a way to help them.
And I would say, do you feel, has that always been a part of your process, or is that something that maybe working with the softball side, with having to maybe be a little bit more, you said you couldn't give it be as real. Is that something that kind of what came about that?
No, I think honestly it just came with maturity and getting older and wiser, hopefully to some degree, more experience. I think in my younger days, there was a lot of my way or the highway. There was a lot of, we do it this way because that's the way I learned it. Mm-hmm. And just the more that I learned, the more I grew, the more experience I got, the more I realized that way was not as successful as I wanted it to be. And so for me, in order to be a more successful coach, I had to find what is the best way to do it. And so over time, I just, through maturity and learning, say, hey, it's not about me, it's about the athlete. And, I'll tell you what, I was a head varsity baseball coach, 23, 24 years old. And, I was immature. And, at 35 and now in my 40s, it's just a lot different. As you have kids, I've got 5 kids, and as you get older and you have kids, it just your perspective and view on things changes, and you become more mature. And for me, it was more about that, and just learning that it's not about my career or about my coaching. It's about how do I make this athlete the best that they can be. And I think it just takes a shift. I think some people might learn that earlier in life. For me, it probably took me into my 30s before I really authentically believed that. And that was just the case for me.
The more serving is like you get into more of a servant leadership kind of role. And do you feel like things have kind of grown for you since you've taken that role?
I think it has helped. It has helped me to have success in the sense, again, of like, I've been able to help more hitters do better and athletes in general. And I think that's resulted in more wins and more success and mm-hmm. things like that. By doing that, for sure, that has definitely been the case, where maybe my old style helped a few players. I feel like this my new philosophy or the style that I coach now has been more successful because I think it impacts and helps more players than just a few of them. Yeah.
Speaking of that impact too, like I know that I know we were talking earlier, and there's a lot of stuff you've been putting out here recently just about making that impact, and about taking the game through, I guess, the character side of the game, what the game kind of teaches us, is that kind of more of your message now and into your lessons and things like that? And than it used to be?
Yeah, I would say, probably 2012, right around that time, I started really wanting to dig in and be an expert, not at the X's and O's and strategy and hitting, because I think I felt pretty good in those areas, but in regards to leadership and culture and more life lessons type stuff, I wanted to get better at that area. I felt like that was an area that was lacking in my expertise. And so I decided to kind of go on a journey of being better at those things. So, and then again, as my career has gone on, you start learning that those are the things that are more important. They're more impactful. They help you win more than the X's and O's. And when you can combine the two things of culture and leadership and chemistry, and also with good skill set and good athletes, it makes it more fun, makes it long lasting, and it's it's just better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That is super cool. And like, I was wondering, because especially you talk about culture, I just, for one thing, it's hit me as like, especially with all of your experience, like you probably saw like crazy amounts of different cultures, like the crazy amounts of different examples of how people help their culture from just, man, explain a little bit about that, like from culture, like, because, culture is almost a feeling you can almost see, but you can just feel it when you're there. So how has those cultures changed from all your different experiences?
That's a good question. I think that, every school that you coach at and every group that you have can have all good cultures, bad cultures, and good leaders and bad leaders. I think as a coach, I think we do our best to try to identify, what is our current team culture? How do we improve it? What leaders should we invest in and trying to create good leadership, and how do we teach those leaders to be good leaders? So, for me, I've always stepped into every job and every place saying, okay, hey, let's get the temperature of the culture here. What is it like? Coaches, athletes across the board, and then how do I help improve it? And so for me, that's been the approach that I've always had. And there's been some bad cultures and there's been some good cultures. And, sometimes it takes longer than you think. And sometimes, it can be something really fast too. It just really depends on the group that you have, the coaches you have, but making it a high priority early on from day one is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that you're taking more, you're strictly in the private sector, you don't really have a team. How do you take those lessons? And like you said, how much important it is. How do you take them on with each of your clients and talk about like, here are the skills that we can develop as well that's going to help your team, which essentially is going to help you?
Yeah, so I think for me, it really boils down to looking at the athletes that I work with, looking at them and having a relationship with them that's not just a hitting coach to a hitter or a client to a coach. It's really about relationship and the person as a whole. So I think a lot of times the conversations I have with them, I try to show and invest in them as people and care about them as people, so that the conversations I have with them and having a strong relationship with them and trust with them, that's really more of the focus. And so when you develop trust and relationship, it's a lot easier to, give someone feedback or try to give them criticism, stuff like that. I tell my college athletes all the time, the same thing goes for people that speak into your life. If it's someone that you really care about, a friend or a family member, and they tell you that you need to work on something in your life, you're going to receive that feedback differently than some stranger off the street who tells you, you need to change something about you. Because the stranger on the street, you're going to look at like, who are you to tell me, how I should live my life or anything like that. And so the same thing goes with coaches and athletes. If coaches and athletes come in and just say, hey, it's, do it this way, do it that way, and then there's no relationship, a player is not going to really want to make those changes because they don't really trust that the coach has their best interest in place. But if there's a relationship there and they trust you and they know that you care about them, when you give them feedback and you give them something to work on, they believe that the coach actually cares about them and they want them to have success, and they're much more willing to buy in and do the things that are necessary to do. So I always look at my athletes now, and I always have, as much as I can, as a relationship and how do I foster and build that relationship the best I can.
What are some ways? I mean, especially, I'm sure it's super tough for you. I know you probably have like online clients that you just see maybe virtually. How do you help do that with so many different clients? And I know with the different, like within your experience, some people would have to be there, maybe a place for a while. It seems like you can kind of dive in right away and kind of get that relationship rolling. What are some strategies that you kind of do to help build that relationship, build that trust?
The biggest thing is by asking more questions than talking. So for me, it's really a matter of trying to, again, ask what their goals are. What are they trying to get out of it? How do they receive feedback? All of those type of things. Because I think a lot of times, I get a lot of minor league players and college players that come to me and send me videos and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, I'm more than willing to help you, but like, I want to know more about like what's going on. Is it something in their head? Is it something with their swing? What goals do they have? And the more questions and the more you can get to know the athlete, the better. So I start from that standpoint again, like, trying to evaluate what is their goals, what's their current situation, so that, versus just working on the swing or whatever the thing is. I think that's more important.
That's great. That is great. Oh man, that's good. So what thing kind of stood out to me, and I know we had kind of touched the base on this earlier as well, before we got rolling, was just a matter of the mental side of things. Because you said like, what's in your head? Can you like elaborate? Like, were you thinking approach there? Were you thinking just mentality period? Like, do I have confidence? Or all
of the above, really. It's just a matter of trying to find out, is it a confidence issue? Is something they overthink and put a lot of pressure on themselves? Or is it, again, they have something that has to do, it could have to do with approach and swinging at bad pitches, play discipline type things, timing. I mean, and so when I talk about the mental side, I'm trying to figure out, maybe it's not a swing issue at all. Maybe they have a great swing and it's something that, again, they're really, they get in their heads really easily. They a lot of pressure. They don't deal with adversity well. And so, I need to know, should we be talking about that type of stuff, or is it actually a swing issue? And for me, a lot of times, as a college coach, after a week, like, let's say one of our best hitters, let's say it's at the University of South Carolina, SEC players, and one of our best hitters had a bad weekend, went over 9 with 7 strikeouts. The first thing they're going to say on Monday is, I need to change my swing, or I need to change this. And I always would push back on them. Okay, what's really going on? Because I don't think your swing changed in the last 3 days. I mean, you might have had a bad weekend. So what is the actual issue? And it could be something they changed in their swings. It's very possible. But my first inclination will always be, okay, what's going on in their head? Are they pressing? And so for me, I want to find those things out, because there are a lot of hitters that go straight to, I need to change my swing, or something's wrong with my swing. And that's actually not the case. So
let's say a person comes into, and you basically realize as the coach, and you determine that it was a mental thing. What would you suggest that a person does? What might you do to help them get over that mental problem?
I talk a lot about how they deal with adversity, and understand that the sport of baseball and softball, the failure rate is so high. And you've got hitters like Mike Trout, who in his last MVP season, had a stretch of going 0 for 19. And so slumps happen, adversity happens. How do you deal with it? How do you flush it? And so for me, a lot of my conversations are understanding that failure is really high in these sports. Hitting is very hard. The best hitters in all of baseball or softball succeed at a 30 to 40% rate at best. And so if you come in with that perspective and understanding, that can really help you to be just less hard on yourself. There's so many perfectionists, so many people with parents with a lot of pressure on them, and stuff like that. So if I can approach them of understanding, okay, hey, this hitting thing is really hard. And the best players in this game fail at this thing quite a bit. So if that's the case, how do I, understand that, so that when I'm 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts and I come up for the 4th time, I can understand that, hey, you know what? All it's going to take is one hit for me to get back into it, one hit to help my team, get on base one time, and not let that 0 for 3 in the last, few innings, dictate what's going to happen in my next at bat. And again, it's how to deal with failure and learning just some perspective.
That's right. Learning some perspective. And so, like, have you ever been in like? Because I'd imagine that your lessons and when you're doing your work is not the typical just go in, we're gonna do the same kind of things. Has that ever been like a full lesson? Like, look, your lesson is just for us to get into your head, for us to get your mind right, get everything squared up, and get you feeling ready to roll. Has that ever been a certain type of like lesson? Let's say lesson.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times I think hitters it just ends up being that's the lesson. Like, hey, you've been in your head, and let's talk through that out. And the thing about being a hitting coach is that a lot of times we're psychologists and more so than coaches. So we spend a lot of time with the psychology of it and talking through hitters. And what's going on in their head and talking through it. So, I think a lot of times, therapy or being a psychologist is what a hitting coach does a lot of.
Sure. No, I agree. Because it is, like you said, it's so hard. It's so hard to do. And what a great perspective to say even about Mike Trout, could you imagine 20 at bats, going in for 19 and perspective is everything. And even in life, for sure. To Coach, I was thinking like another part of the mental thing is a lot of routines. Are there any kind of routines that you'll bring into your guys, or like, let's say something specific that you want them to do in the cage, or even when they get done the cage, to kind of help them prepare that kind of routine that they would have in a game?
For me, it's really about talking about routine and making them create one. And so I let them to a degree. I help them a little bit in the sense of like, hey, let me help you develop a routine. And some of that can be, hey, you're going to do some type of warm up exercises. We'll get to do a little tee work, like, kind of walk them through a routine, but I also put it on them to take some ownership to create a routine. I want to know what their routines are because everyone's, again, is so different. You have some hitters that, they have to have a very particular routine and some other hitters that have much more laid back one. So for me, it's more about the coach trying to find out, what their routine is, making sure that they have one that they're comfortable with. And then, and again, like being aware of it so that if they're not doing the routine or something's off, I can kind of help identify that and I can come back to them and say, hey, I noticed you weren't doing your routine today, or you doing this routine differently. Why is that? And they might say something like, well, I'm 0 for my last 12, so I'm going to try this. And it's like, okay, that's cool. Let's try this routine today. And, again, trying to just help them to find a routine that works for them.
And you're basically talking routines like pregame routine.
Yes.
Right. So what about, and because that's great. And now what about in a sense of a at bat routine, like pitch by pitch, a pitch routine?
Yeah. So I make every one of our hitters have some type of routine. For me, a sample that I'd like to give them is that when they get into the box, the first thing they would do is look over to get a sign. And as they're getting their sign, start working on their breathing and start slowing down their breathing. Again, like understanding that a slow heart rate, the slowest your heart rate can get, the better decisions you're going to make. Timing, your swing is going to be faster. So we're trying to slow down the breathing. And then from there, trying to find a focus point, whether it's like looking at the plate or a pebble of dirt. And then when you're looking at the pitcher, again, continue to focus on breathing and starting to kind of start getting our eyes focused, our mind focused on what we're trying to accomplish. And then I like to have some positive self-talk, get the voices out of their heads, they're negative, and something like rip it, or, something positive in their heads, kind of get their heads going good. And then each pitch, whether it's a good choice or a bad choice or a foul ball, I like them to kind of take their foot and scratch the box, kind of like wipe the plate, wipe the box clean. Especially if they made a mistake, I want them to kind of wipe the box clean. Say, okay, you know what? That last pitch, I made a bad decision, but I'm going to wipe the box clean, and now we're starting over again. Same thing with an at bat. Let's say your last at bat, you struck out. When you get into the batter's box, I always tell them, hey, let's scrape out wipe the box clean and reset from there. So, and again, I kind of tell them they can have any routine they want. I just want them to have one.
Mm-hmm. Now, has it been more of a challenge for you to, like, now when you take it into, like, let's say the indoor facility and you got to do it in your cages, in your cage work, or do you still try to bring that same kind of routine into the cage work?
Yeah, I mean, when working in the cages, I think we talk a lot about trying to create it as much of a game-like atmosphere as possible. So for me, we want to do as much as we can to make it game-like, from routine, stepping out of the box. Like we never do rapid fire. Like we always make sure hitters are stepping out, stepping in, trying to make it as game-like as possible.
Okay. So, like, are you able to now, like I'm just thinking of, like, live at bats, live at bat season's upon us, as guys are getting ready to roll. Is that something that you're trying to, are you able to bring that part to them? Like, you might hire some pitchers in, or however, I guess your facility probably works it logistically to bring in some pitchers.
Yeah. So I don't work at a facility. I don't do lessons. I only work in person with Major League Baseball hitters. So, okay. For me, and especially because I live in California and everything's still pretty much on lockdown. It's been difficult this year. But having said that, we try to create as much live arms as possible. Even coaching in college the last few years, trying to find graduates and trying to find local people that could pitch. I'll tell you, I think in the next 10 years, you will see Major League Baseball teams have entire pitching staffs just to throw live ABs. It'll definitely happen.
So, okay. So let's roll into this, man. So you're basically talking about challenging, making more training, much more game-like, and actually what you just prior to said about dealing with failure. So do you feel are you, especially with your pro clients, do you find yourself challenging them a lot more than maybe what you used to?
Yes. Yeah. I would say 5 to 7 years ago, there was a lot more feel good BP.
Yeah.
And I would say nowadays, one of my pro guys right now basically gets warmed up and goes straight to the machine where it's actually dealing. So, I would say, there's a way more challenge now than there was 5 years ago. I think, I think most hitters still need to have a balance of feeling good and some confidence and some machine, and making it challenging. But once we get started and warm and loose, we're going pretty tough. I'll tell you, last year at Fresno State, we got into January for the month going into the season, we went full challenge live every day. There was very little feel good BP, very little front toss and tee. It was, tough machine, tough live every day. And it's usually not a favorite of most players to have that much challenging, but it did prepare them for the season. And I think once the season got going and we were much better prepared than other teams, they understood why we did it.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Do you feel like the juice is worth the squeeze with as you're pounding and challenging those guys?
Yep. You have to be really smart about it, because you can really demoralize and bury a hitter or a team if you don't do it the right way. You can't just go straight to just owning them. It's got to be a good combination of building them into that, preparing them for it, helping them with it. It takes some skill to make sure you do it the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, but I think what you're doing too is, instead of just the lip service of, we got to deal with failure better. Like, we're going to implement it into the game. And I agree. I think that's definitely where it's coming to. You can definitely see it coming. The Astros started all that. They started it where, you hear those guys, they were throwing live at people, breaking bats during BP, and people were laughing at them, and look where they're at. So, that was awesome, Coach. That was great. I guess another thing is, you talked about the challenging of it. That's really kind of going to start influencing the game. Technology has definitely influenced the game, right? And now it's starting to make a difference. Like, what kind of technology do you find that's beneficial to hitters? How are you using it to implement and make decisions for your hitters?
I would say, I use the hit tracks for I think ball exit data is really important. So exit velocity and launch angle and spin and those things. And so hit tracks and Rapsodo, TrackMan. I think collecting batted ball data is really important to me. I also use a bat sensor. Like I like blast motion, but there's also diving kinetics. Technology wise, I like to use Win Reality. For vision training, there's also a program called Game Sense that's really good. So I use that a lot as well. I would say those are probably the main things from a technology standpoint that we use. I also use K-Vest, which is a wearable thing that gives us a lot of data on body movements and positions. That's really important as well. So, I guess it really depends just on the level and of the hitter, and how deep of a dive you really want to get into when it comes to hitters. So, but I use all of that data just to really assess everybody and figure out, hey, where is this hitter at? Where do they need to be? And kind of create some goals around it. So that's probably the biggest thing.
So will you use this for every hitters, or there will certain be hitters, like let's say you got your pro guy that say, look, I'm just not into that. So like you just don't use that, or to use it with everyone to get that baseline?
I would say almost everyone. Almost every single person that we're collecting a ton of data on. If I'm working with them in person, the K-Vest maybe not as much, or Win Reality not as much. It really depends on when a hitter comes to me, like what exactly are their goals? Is it like full on hand holding, and after every single major league game, you're going to call me from the room and FaceTime me to go over every at bat? Or like every month, you just want to send me a swing versus video and talk about that swing over video. So, I would say in my experience of doing this, you have hitters that want a lot of hand holding and they want a lot of work, and other hitters that they don't want a lot of information or data, and they want very little. So I think, especially at the pro level, you've got guys literally across the spectrum breaking down swings for hours after games to guys who never want to talk about, their swing or hitting or that type of stuff.
And it's just, good coaching of being able to know when to push that guy and take a step back, or I guess knowing who that guy is first and foremost, and then kind of deciding how am I going to give this guy's information.
Yep.
Yeah. So like, are there things that you just like, have you seen like correlations between like certain blast data and cause like blast data is like pre-ball flight, and then you got ball flight. Have you seen any correlations with anything, or that people should, or like thing that you kind of focus more on based off of maybe some correlation in the data?
Yeah, I think the two biggest ones for me is bat speed and attack angle. A high bat speed correlates to high exit velocity, and attack angle, the angle the bat comes in, usually correlates to line drives and distance. So those are probably the two biggest. I think there's a few others here and there that are, but for me, those are the two biggest correlators of success in regards to batted ball data, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Now, based on that, let's say like you need to work with a guy on his approach angle. Will you then take some of the other maybe technologies that you say, okay, here's how we're going to create, or maybe I'm thinking of like K-Vest. Like, do you know, okay, your sequence just off where we're not able to get the bat in the path right like soon enough?
Depends. It really depends on what, like I said, it could, from an attack angle standpoint, it might be just a few drills to help them get the ball in the, that, help them get their attack angle. I mean, all of it is a big pie in the sense of video, KVS, everything. And so by looking at all of it, building a plan from there. So it just really depends. It could be as simple as doing a couple of drills. It could be working on something with their hip hinge and side bend and like their movement patterns. It could be some type of physical screening assessment. Like it could be so many things that go to that. But what I'll usually do is go to like a drill or two and just see, does that drill help at all with that attack angle? And if not, why not? And trying to figure out what is the best plan of attack.
Sure. No, that's understandable. I mean, because I know every hitter's different. I know it could be very general here, but it's still really good to even for people to hear, like, if we're just kind of cookie cuttering these things, not really doing the best we can for guys, because it could be different. It couldn't just be telling guys like hit it over the net or hit it over the L screen. Like you said, the first thing is getting your feedback and just asking them, like, what are your goals? Like, is your goal to, like, I was doing a no strike drill with a kid, and like he put on the outside, I'm like, so what's your goal? You're gonna hit the second base? They can hit a ground ball? Like, that's what you're gonna do with no strikes? Just to think about the goals, But Coach, you said about hip hinge, so it just kind of clicked in my mind, especially with like attacking on certain like things like med balls. And when you talk about hip hinge, I'm talking about like weightlifting. So being as high level of as a coach that you are, is that something you just kind of outsource or make sure guys are also lifting and putting that as part of their program?
Yeah. So I would say for me, a lot of it has to do with when you're coaching at the college or pro level, you have strength and conditioning coaches. So
right.
For me, I'm always making sure I have a really good relationship with them, working together with them on hitting plans, talking about those type of things with them and working with them on that. For me, I'm pretty well versed in strength and conditioning, I'm on base U certified in the sense of screening. So for me, my plan of attack is to approach it with my knowledge of strength and conditioning. And then if I can't figure it out, I'll reach out to some strength and conditioning coaches that are friends of mine and say, okay, hey, I've tried to figure this thing out from a strength and conditioning standpoint. I need your help. And so for me, sometimes I'll do that approach, but for 99% of my career coaching, whether in college or pros, we have strength and conditioning coaches that we work alongside with to make decisions like that and help with. And that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Or just like you said, if this guy just can't get into his hip hinge, that has to be like, look, this guy we're really struggling here. And the strength coach is like, we just can't get into it. And so, all right, we're going to get into those things. So, so it's okay. So you do have just that relationship with them of a strength and conditioning coach. So let's say, you're back in high school, you're back in the high school hat, put your varsity hat back on. What would you do differently there for, like, let's say maybe a lower level doesn't have the opportunity for that. Can't just call up a phone or just like talk to the guy, the strength coach. How would you approach
for
that?
Me, I would say, for me, I would, again, I've been the weight room guy at a high school before. And so for me, just trying to get as educated as possible to help athletes. For me, the biggest thing is technique and learning how to do technique right and to teach it. So, if I'm a high school coach and I don't have strength and conditioning guys or people there that can really help me, I'm going to spend the off season. I'm going to invest some time in learning it and getting better at it. And I would say the same thing for any coach in any sport. Like, hey, if you want to get better at something, you got to learn it. And if that's a weak spot for you, you got to start, take the classes and figure out how you can help your hitters.
So here is one of, a very high profile hitting coach saying that as a hitting coach, we need to invest into strength and conditioning and knowing when the body moves.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, all I'm saying is that speaks pretty big. It speaks volumes of knowing that needs to be part of a person's program, that strength and conditioning piece and knowing what you're doing. So will you actually, do you like to involve any med balls, water bags, and things like that into your training?
Yeah, all the time. Again, like for me, my experience with college is that time is done differently with the strength and conditioning coaches, and they're
Sure.
doing it. If I'm a high school coach, I'm going to create some time to do that in the weight room, and absolutely med balls and having an entire program around that. I haven't had to manage that in about 9-10 years, really. But if I was to coach high school again nowadays, or work in a facility with hitters like that, I would absolutely have that as part of my program.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever would you ever see any value of like bringing them, like blending them with like your cage work or maybe your flips or certain things that you're trying to work on?
Absolutely, yeah, all the time. I would say again, like if I was back in the private lessons world and working with high school players or younger players, and they weren't going to strength and conditioning coach or program, I would absolutely develop their system and all their hitting plan. A big portion of that would be strength and conditioning and med balls and deadlifts and stuff like that. So it would definitely be integrated with the regular, whatever their hitting plan is.
Mm-hmm. So, and you've talked about hitting plans a couple times. Has this been part of your, like, how are you able to, this is kind of twofold, because one, I know it's pretty easy for you, like with your individual clients, you make individual plans, of course, based off of that. How did you take that same philosophy? Because I know that I've seen your stuff and I know you do this, but how have you been able to take that same kind of individual approach within the culture and within the team setting that you've gone at your different stops?
I approach it the exact same. At Fresno State, I think I had 20 something hitters. At South Carolina, I had 20 something hitters. At Missouri, I had 24 hitters, maybe. Every single hitter had an individual plan down to the T, exactly of what they needed to work on, what drills they were working on, their full assessment. And honestly, it's just at that level, the amount of time and energy and work we put into it, and 12-hour days, sometimes 7 days a week, that's just part of it. And so it's to me, it's the same approach. It just depends on, every coach has a different commitment level and approach. And for me, at that level, you get into it what you put into it. So for me, I want to win. I want my hitters to have success. And so I probably put in too much time on it, but that's why we do it.
Yeah, I'm sure your players also really respected that and know that, that you're doing something not just for the whole, to do it. It's also specifically for them. So like what would a BP session look like then? So, everybody takes BP or batting practice, during maybe before a game or while you're taking a practice. What does that look like when you've individualized and broken down 24, 27 different hitting plans?
And so I would say at most places there's some type of a station rotation. In the last 3 or 4 jobs I've been, like at Fresno State, we had 5 batting cages and the field. So, I break them into groups of 2 or 3 hitters. They do like kind of a station rotation, and at least 1 or 2 stations a day are what we call the homework station. And so they choose what to work on in those stations in a team BP setting. And so, and they know what their hitting plan is. It's not like they get to that station and go, oh, I wonder what I should do today. Mm-hmm. They know the things that they need to work on. And then we have a few team drills, a few competing drills, like the machine will be set up to curve balls or change ups or fastballs. And then on the field, BP, the same thing. It could be like a day where it's a no ground ball BP and you get a point for every time you hit a ball out of the infield, or it could be some other point system, or, whatever. It could be a swing away day. It could be do this round, but usually some form of station rotation based on the time. And it's a combination of the hitters working on their individual hitting plan, a few team drills, and then a few, game-like situational drills in the sense of machines or live pitching.
Yeah, I love that you were able to. I think you spoke it so well. Because I think the misconception is like, oh, the batting practice is all individualized. Where it's still like, no, there's still some things that we all do in the sense of a team setting. And especially like I even said, the third part is it's game-like situations too. But then are going to have one part of it that, yes, here's your plan, work that. I think that's maybe the misconception that, it's all individualized, when no, like we still have a team station. This is what everyone's doing. That's what our team didn't do well last game or however it was. And then here's where your hitting plan station is. And now, would you basically I guess this is probably a style question though. Within your style and when your philosophy, would you kind of stationed at the individual thing, or did you like to see the team station?
Yeah, I would float around. It really would be just me kind of just floating around all the stations. I would say, like at Fresno State, we had 4 cages or 3 cages right next to each other where I could see really well there, and then kind of float around. So for me, or it could be a day that, hey, you know what, for the homework station, I want to see these 3 or 4 or 5 hitters. And so I would hang around that station more, just really dependent on the day and what I wanted to accomplish and what I wanted to see. It probably changed for me every day.
Yeah. Well, especially, I mean, that's just, it's real, like whatever, I guess I'm sure like whatever, you have a great feel for things. And so you just kind of feel like, where do you kind of need to be and make those adjustments as necessary. So yeah, it's fantastic, man. That's awesome. Wow. We just rolled through a ton of different things. Coach, I guess one thing is a hitting coach as well. And because I know, really your job as a hitting coach, I know is to make things better. I guess what you can put on as a hitting coach, I'm sure your job is to still score runs, right? And I guess I don't want to say it's controversial, but like, where did you always stand on bunting, and like, where would that come into, as well as, was that whatever the station was? How did that change from I know it was a big thing in softball. But kind of, was that part of maybe an individual plan? Was it still part of a team stuff, or kind of where was your philosophy when it came to that?
For me, especially at the higher levels, like I love bunting. I'm all for bunting for a base hit, push bunt, drag bunt, finding ways on with the bunt and putting pressure on the defense. I'm not a fan of sack bunting. I especially at the lower levels. I mean, never at the lower levels. I would never. But at the high school, college level, pro level, there are always exceptions to the rules. I think late in the game, in a tie game or a 1-run game with a runner on second with no outs in the bottom of the lineup. I mean, I think if you are playing for 1 run, sack bunting from second to third, there's definitely reasons to do it. But I would say, generally speaking, a sack bunt from first to second, very, very rarely would I ever recommend that. Just doesn't make sense. But again, like I love bunting for base hit. We work on it. We teach it. We have stations in it for hitting. Not very many, but we do a little bit, and we do a lot of what we call like drag bunt scrimmages and find ways to make bunting fun in practice. And so sometimes you still got to practice it and be good at it, but we probably don't use that tool in the toolbox that often.
Sure. But I'm sure it's also depending on the individual, if you have a big
individual, the team, everything.
Yeah. Big burner, that needs to be it. It's not a big, strong guy. It's gonna be part of your game. So then we have to work on it. It almost seems like people are like, that's why I was wondering if it'd be just part of like your homework station.
Yeah. I mean, for some people, yeah, a little bit, but not very often.
Mm-hmm. You just got bigger fish to fry, I guess you would say, bigger.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on the hitter. Again, like if it's someone who does really well with it and gets on base with it and it's a good piece of their tools, then we'll work on it a lot more.
Right. Wow. Yeah, just done a ton, man. We're almost an hour in here. So I mean, what do you like? What's been one of I say you kind of touched about your biggest challenge right now is just with getting shut down in California and things like that. What has been some of the biggest challenges that you've had within your experience and, trying to get hitters to reach their goals?
I think just the biggest challenge right now is just because of COVID. It's been tough to get into a rhythm and a routine, to see live pitching, to get the work in that they need to work at every level from T-ball on up. It's just been tough on everybody, and mentally, physically preparing wise, and trying to keep spirits up and trying to encourage and trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think it's just a tough time for everybody. And so, again, trying to stay positive, trying to find ways to encourage, and that can be challenging in times where there's stuff going on in the world that seems to be a lot more important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of stuff. It's again going back to that psychologist, that you are, and you basically became a psychologist in the last 20 some years of being a coach, But Coach, I guess just wrapping things up, man. Is there anything, I guess maybe pieces of advice for younger coaches, things that you might have wished you knew that you know now that you wish you knew back then when you first started this big journey?
Yeah, I would say, the biggest piece of advice I ever got, I remember probably about 15 years ago, was a coach told me, the biggest mistake that coaches make is they develop a philosophy and then they spend their entire career defending it. And that really stuck out to me because, to me, I know what I taught 15 years ago wasn't very good in relation to what I coach and teach now. So for me, my best advice for coaches is to always learn, always be learning, having a growth mindset, always be willing to be wrong and to own it and say, you know what, I thought I did the best I could, but I've learned a better way now, and I am better at this now. And so for me, just coaches need to put away their ego and pride, and they need to continue to learn, continue to get better, never settle. To me, I think if they can do that and continue to learn and grow, they'll continue to be effective coaches.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you for that, Coach. That was awesome. So just, I guess, in wrapping things up, people want to reach out to you more, find more great stuff that you're doing. What's the best way to find the great stuff that Coach Lisle's doing?
You can find me on all social media at Coach Lisle, and all my hitting stuff is at thehittingvault.com. And so I think those would be the best ways to find me. You can always Google Coach Lisle and you'll find all his pages too, but check out the Hitting Vault, and that's all.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, Coach, I honestly, it was incredible. My head was kind of spinning. I just looked up and I couldn't believe how long it is. And I really want to thank you for taking the time away from your family, and hope you guys do well with through all this shutdown and everything else like that. But I really, really appreciate it. And it was a tremendous amount of information.
I appreciate it very much. And thanks for having me on.
Coach Matt Lisle, just given a ton of information in what seemed like a very short amount of time. Just had a lot of fun with that, man. I know some of you guys' heads might be spinning. You might have to go back again, listen to that. I know it was a lot in a short bit. I even felt like that for me, and I'm a pretty fast-paced guy, a lot of energy, and Coach Lisle brought it even more. He brought some major energy and great passion, and was fortunate to get through just different things. So again, if you want to reach out to him, check him out at thehittingvault.com. Look at him on social media, and reach out. You can see he's always willing to learn, willing to share. Doesn't know me from Adam, and I was just, again, I followed his stuff for years, and just been loving the stuff he's putting out right now, and just reached out, and he's willing to share, and I think it just goes to another great thing about baseball coaches is in this fraternity of people that are willing to share, willing to get better. And you heard it towards the end of his advice is about continuing a growth mindset. And I think the more willing you share is you're putting yourself out there to be vulnerable too, and not putting your ego aside. And guy didn't have to do that. He didn't have to come on here and do that with me. And none of these coaches did. None of these coaches I've had on for 48 episodes have had to do it. It's just a matter of them learning to win, wanting to learn, and serving, growing the game, and man, just been really fortunate. And so again, Coach Lisle, I just want to thank you so much for the time, and it's valuable information. know it was a lot, and I just hope everybody enjoyed it and got some great nuggets. I was able to. I took a lot of notes, and this is a lot of fun, and this is a memorable one. And man, I had a great time. And so, if you really enjoy it as well, please share it, share the episode, share it with someone that you think would enjoy it. Maybe they're knowing how to maybe not focus so much on their swing, and maybe it's more of a decision making. And because like Coach Lisle talked about that, and as guys that I've been working with here recently, talking to them about the same thing. Like you first got to see what's going on in the mind, and then then we'll kind of dive into your swing. Sometimes you just make a bad decision on a bad pitch, and it's not about your swing; it's about your decision. So, but yeah, man, feel free share this out to them. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and check it out on Podbean, iTunes, and let me know if there's someone out there like that just gets great content, that willing to share, willing to learn, growth mindset. This is the kind of guys that we're trying to go after. That also, this group of people that just love to grow the game and just talk baseball, and being able to show that we teach lessons through the game and are trying to be the best man we can to help not only grow the game but grow the people around us, because we're just fortunate to be part of this game. So Coach Lisle, thanks so much. Thank you guys for listening, and until next week, keep getting better.